We're diving deep into the juiciest tales.
Today, I am beyond thrilled to welcome a truly multifaceted guest to Pop Culture Exposé, Brian Pocrass. By day, Brian is a lawyer, but his passion for storytelling and preserving pop culture history has led him to dive into the world of filmmaking. He's one of the creative minds behind the upcoming documentary Heather O'Rourke, She Was Here, a heartfelt exploration of the beloved 80s child star whose legacy has captivated so many. Brian's unique perspective, both as a lawyer and a filmmaker, allows him to navigate the complexities of Hollywood with a keen eye for detail, giving him a rare ability to tell stories that deeply resonate with audiences. We're excited to talk with him today about his journey, his insights into the 80s and 90s pop culture landscape, and of course, the inspiration behind his latest project. So, Brian, welcome to the show. It is truly an honor to have you here.
Oh, I thank you. That was a very nice introduction. I appreciate that. And it's nice to be
Of
here.
course.
Nice to speak with you I'm in Los Angeles. I believe you're in Chicago. So we're
Yes.
the good old Zoom kind of allows you to talk to people across the country. So happy to be here.
Yeah, technology is great. Really happy to have you here and that you're taking the time out to speak to me in regards to this, and also in regards to a very important and beloved figure, that of Heather. But before we get started, can you take the time to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and what led you to create a documentary?
Yeah, no, well, I got kind of an interesting road because I went to USC Film School and I was an aspiring filmmaker, as all people are to go to USC. And I pretty much worked in the entertainment business for about 15 years after graduating, working at different jobs. I worked at the Game Show Network, kind of creating questions for game shows. And then I was doing a lot of things working at Fox and working in the television departments over there on the corporate side. And then I kind of worked a little bit on viral content through my company, 22 Vision. We did a lot of these reunions of 90s child stars for different movies like Hook or Little Rascals. You may have
Oh,
seen them online, like where they recreated the posters, and a lot of them got a lot of viral attention, which was a lot of fun. And those were all kind of inspired because I grew up with a lot of former child actors. And so they kind of weren't happy about how they were being portrayed online at that time. And kind of like people would companies would sit there and take a photo from their MySpace page or their Instagram or any of those places, and they just would take them and say, "This is what they look like now," and give wrong information and everything like that. If there's friends who wanted to be off the grid, and so I kind of gave them a platform where you can kind of get the truth out there and just kind of let's take some flattering photos and kind of you can say what you're doing today, and then kind of if anyone wants to make those galleries, they'll be able to kind of pull that photo. So that was kind of the inspiration for that. And that was a lot of fun. And then kind of after a while, I decided to go back to law school at my old age. You know, so going back to school in like my late 30s and getting a law degree and kind of transitioning a little bit to doing personal injury attorney, personal injury law. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the past year. But also I kind of still have that entertainment passion. And this kind of project came up about, my last year of law school, and all of a sudden it's kind of like you stop doing one job and then you get reeled back in. And so I kind of I produced this documentary. It's the first documentary I've ever produced, and it was a bit of a passion project. So it was a pleasure coming out of retirement to work on this.
it's definitely something to be very proud about, and I just find it so lovely that you are able to have, your daily career, your profession that you've decided on, but you can also still do something that is another passion of yours. And congratulations on being able to juggle all of that. I can't imagine how you did that. And so early into your career as well. I had no idea about that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it was definitely a challenge. And it was especially being that this project was literally a two-man team. It was me and my producing partner, Nick Bailey. And this was literally us and her family. So it was kind of, there's no, at the time, there was really no production company, no anything. And we just basically got to, it's kind of good and bad, because obviously the two of us had full-time jobs and have lives that we're juggling. And so really kind of getting to do work on this during free time and everything like that is always a challenge. And of course, every documentary and every project has their own challenges that present themselves. And so this has been kind of a project we've been working on probably for a couple of years, and it's finally at its final stages now, which is really wonderful.
It's nice to hear that. I can't wait for it to come out. And before we get into all of the details about Heather O'Rourke, and before we forget at the end, how can people follow you and this upcoming documentary that we're going to dive into a little bit more?
Yeah, well, probably at this point, the best to follow is there's a Facebook page, Heather O'Rourke, She Was Here movie. And that's probably at least the best place for people to follow to find out information about the film itself. Following me personally on social media, I think people would find kind of boring, because they're listening to you because of the entertainment stuff. They don't really care about me and what I'm eating and my children or all that kind of fun stuff. But at least like for the film, they can kind of follow that way.
Sounds good, and totally respect that, Brian. Now, what sparked your passion for pop culture, especially the music, movies, and iconic moments of the 80s and 90s? Because obviously, pop culture runs deep in you, knowing your back history and that you got pulled right back into pop culture, even when you switched careers. So, what first sparked that for you?
I think growing up in LA, you kind of have to be interested in entertainment, or at least it's going to be so much around you that it's hard to not be pulled into that world. And also just growing up, I always loved movies, television, and kind of especially when it's kind of happening in your backyard, it makes you even more passionate because you see it happening and kind of see a lot of people who I went to school with who kind of were in the business. And it was always something I kind of wanted to do. And as a child, I, of course, wanted to be a child actor myself. But unfortunately, I guess, well, fortunately, I was very tall and I had a baby face. So that's not a good combo for booking as a child actor. So because I looked older than I was, but I kind of had this young face. So I think I wasn't the most marketable that way. So I think it's just always kind of run deep. And then, of course, as I've gotten older and going to film school and kind of really learning about the craft and learning about filmmaking, and I'm just kind of always been kind of a big nerd when it comes to all of that. I kind of want to figure out everything. So that's why at least and of course the 80s and 90s is the eras I grew up in.
Yeah, me too. It's been extremely nostalgic reliving all of these moments, having gone through them myself and now having children too. And there's still some of the same trends or childhood aspects that are popular now. It is such a mind trip. So, speaking of which, Brian, the 80s and 90s were such vibrant times in the pop culture history. What do you think makes those decades so special and nostalgic for people today? And like myself, have you had any um OMG or nostalgic moments with your own kids relating to aspects that you liked at pop culture back then that maybe they like now?
Well, I think that probably, the 80s and the 90s are nostalgic for us, like for you and I, everyone kind of has I think their moment where they get nostalgic. And I think right now, at least with this online era, the 90s have really kind of been the hot spot where a lot of people with all those 90s cons and these conventions. And I think just a lot of people who are really active on social media are people who are our age, people maybe in their 30s or their 40s are kind of into that nostalgic era, because people who are in their 20s, they're not quite nostalgic yet because they're still young, so they're still kind of living through their heyday. So I think a lot of probably people like us who are parents or they're working a full-time job, we get nostalgic towards things that we grew up with. And I think it has to do with things you watch as a child, and things like, you kind of watch television and movies very different as a child than how you do now. I think as a child,
Yeah.
you kind of watch things over and over and over and over again. I mean, I probably saw Back to the Future, 20 or 30 times. And it's like, nowadays I rarely will ever see anything more than once. So it's kind of, I think just back then things get so ingrained into your mind for like, different things, even silly, stupid shows that you would watch or movies that you'd watch kind of continuously. I think the repetitiveness of an era when you're a child, that's what makes it nostalgic, because it's like you remember a really different time than what you're living right now. So I think that's kind of, I think, why right now the 80s and 90s really are something special. And I think it's nostalgic, I guess to us. I'm not sure how nostalgic it is to people like my parents. They can care less about Stand By Me and E.T.
Oh,
and all those, movies from the 90s and stuff, because they, were older and just saw the movies once and probably never saw it again. Whereas, I sat there and watched like, movies like Parenthood and Problem Child 2, hundreds of times. And as far
yeah.
as my kids go, I'm looking forward to. My kids are 3 and 5 months. One, I have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old, so they haven't quite hit anything nostalgic for me. I mean, they're just watching, YouTube videos or kids silly simple songs
Yeah.
or Caillou
That
or
makes sense then.
Yeah, Peppa Pig. I'm sure is going to be nostalgic for them. For me, it's just annoying.
Yeah, oh yes. I don't know if it will be nostalgic for anyone long term. I don't know about that. Um,
You never know. I mean,
but
definitely not for us. Well, it's funny when you have, I don't know if you got more than one kid, but it's like when you go
yeah.
through it, when you go through it with one, and then all of a sudden the second one comes, and now she's watching those little silly simple song videos that he used to watch, and it's like, oh no, not again.
Yeah, no, get me out of this loop. No, I have a 6 and a 4-year-old. So my 6-year-old is obsessed with Ghostbusters, Nintendo,
Well, like the new
Ninja
Ghostbusters.
Turtles,
Well, it's
everything, all
the
of
new ones.
them,
Okay, so
all of
yeah,
them.
they'll actually watch old ones too. I mean, it's of course, a lot of the brands get brought back, but I mean,
Yeah.
I wonder, like, the funny thing, little stupid thing, and when I was in law school in the first like the first day or so, there was somebody who was speaking, and they were kind of like telling us about what it's like to be in law school, and kind of you have to trust the process. And the person speaking was like, because of course, keep in mind, this is a whole group of 20-year-olds, and I'm sitting here in my late 30s, kind of like the old man of the group. And the person speaking was like, it's kind of like that movie, that movie with Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan, where they were like, doing the waxing on and the waxing off, and I'm sitting here thinking, are you really quoting the remake of Karate Kid? I'm sitting there in the front row, like
Oh
thinking, oh
no.
my goodness, like this is what they're referring to. I'm like, come on, you got to talk. This is obviously before Cobra Kai or anything, but just kind of, it's like, seriously, you're quoting the remake.
I'm embarrassed for them. No.
Mhm.
But you mentioned one of my favorites, Stand By Me. That's in my top 5. Also, love me some Goonies. That's probably the one I've seen the most. I actually had the pleasure of why I was having my child. That was playing in the hospital. So that was a full circle moment. But yeah, no, you bring up
Right,
such a good
right when you were
point,
giving
Brian,
when
about
you were giving birth, was it during this part when they were shooting out of the water slide? No, I don't know.
no. No. But you bring up such a good point that when you are younger, you watch these movies on repeat. I can't remember the last time I watched a movie on repeat. Um, which is sad, but I also don't think they make movies like they used to before, but that's a different topic.
Yeah, definitely. Things are just different. And also, there's movies, or most things are made for streaming. And so it's a little different. It is a different world. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not really saying, of course, we could say ours is better, but it's different. So I mean, there's just different, there's things that are good and there's things that are bad about kind of the industry and the things that are being made now. But at least,
Yeah,
like,
good point.
we really hold a lot of these things special to us. Like in the 90s, there were a lot of little movies that were made for like the $10 million budget. All those, like, there's a big string of, like, baseball movies or movies like The
Hmm.
Sandlot or things kind of like The Babysitter's Club, or all these little tiny movies that went into the theater. And nowadays, those type of movies, if they're made, are going to be like Lifetime movies or maybe a little tiny Hulu film. So
Yeah,
it's kind of like they don't get to be seen in the correct medium that they deserve to be seen in.
very true. And I can only imagine how much more that landscape is going to change in the next 2 to 5 years with the direction things are
Mhm.
going. But going back to the 80s, Brian, the 1980s saw really the rise of blockbuster films, iconic music, and a new wave of horror. Which films or music artists from that era left the biggest mark on you?
Well, I mean, of course you got to have Michael Jackson in there. So, I mean, he was, I mean, I think in the 80s, he's really at least in my life, in my world, that was the one that made the biggest mark. And so, I mean, he was the biggest artist. And for films, I mean, you kind of, it's hard to remember because, of course, I was very young in the 80s. So the type of movies I was watching were maybe not the ones that I would have if I were older. Like I wasn't watching Fast Times at Ridgemont High or Ferris Bueller or any of the John Hughes movies just because I was so young. I don't think, even though I kind of probably snuck in to watch Breakfast Club at one point, and I just like or just like 16 Candles my sister had, and I was just happy because I got to see a little bit of nudity in a movie. That was kind of exciting. Revenge of the Nerds. But I think when I think of the 80s, I think of more of those blockbuster films. And of course, Spielberg's films kind of really jump out at you when you think of the 80s and you think movies like E.T. and some of those big ones. I mean, E.T. is kind of one of the biggest ones that jump out to me. And of course, Poltergeist and a lot of those, the horror movies, which I at the time was not allowed to watch. Things like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. Those things were not, so I was kind of sheltered on my movie watching a little bit, except when I snuck a little bit of Revenge of the Nerds in there.
I was able to sneak a lot of those movies. Thank goodness I turned out normal after sneaking a lot of those movies. I just like to think I'm very well-rounded. It was a so I was taking a look at society and learning the ins and outs of everyone from watching those type of things. But I actually watched ET last night with my family. Um, just thinking about what we're talking about today, and obviously wasn't gonna be watching Poltergeist with my kids, so watch ET last night, so that was fun.
Yeah, even though your kids, I think, are Heather's age when she filmed it, so maybe that would make sense. But Heather didn't really understand too much what was going on while she was filming it, as far as like, just other than making a movie.
Yeah. Now, horror movies had made a major moment in the 80s with films like Poltergeist. How do you think that the horror genre from that time has influenced today's film? Do you think that they've had any influence?
No, I think they've had a great influence. I think it's just all the horror movies just kind of build up as far as like ones that were made, kind of like the ones that were made in the 80s, kind of built up from the 70s. And they kind of just then went into the 90s and kind of there was that resurgence of the horror films in that late 90s when Scream came out. And then all of a sudden, all those teen slasher movies started coming out. And a lot of them were just paying homage to those older films. And I think they really, any type of the new horror movies now, either you'll have your real gory ones like Saw, like those type of ones, or you get more psychological thrillers or things like the Ring. So I mean, I think it's a lot of times just like when it comes, of course, we're filming this and we're recording this in October. This is kind of usually the month when all the horror movies come out. And I think just I think really any young filmmaker now is inspired by films that they watched when they were younger, which is usually the 80s or so. So I think you see a lot of young filmmakers are making films that kind of have a lot of reference to the 80s movies or the 90s movies, especially things like Stranger Things that are more kind of sci-fi. I don't know if you would call that horror, but it's more kind of in that sci-fi world.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are, of course, heavily nostalgic. And that's kind of the whole beauty of projects like that. So I just think they have a lot of influence in it because it kind of just the horror genre has just continued to build.
Very good observation. I appreciate the type of material that those that who are nostalgic from the 80s or the 90s are making, like Seth Rogen. Not in regards to horror, but just Seth Rogen, who made the new Ninja Turtles cartoon movie. He has that nostalgic feel from back then, but now he's putting his spin on it. I'm also really excited to see how they're going to be bringing back Scream, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, those
Holy
will probably be pretty easy to come back. I mean, they're just, they're nostalgic movies in themselves. So it's, horror movies they usually get made quite, it's probably the biggest genre that just continues to always go strong because they can be made strong, they can be made very cheap, and then they can usually do really well. So it's especially on streaming, and I guess I don't know if people buy DVDs anymore, but it's like that genre seems to always be a strong one. No matter how the industry changes, people just because they can churn them out, they're kind of fun to make, and they can be done very cheap and could be a big reward. And it's just an easy green light.
Yeah.
easier, I'll say. Not easy. Nothing's ever easy, but that's definitely it's so hard as the industry goes on to kind of get things made. I mean, of course, even with the documentary, it's a lot of issues that it's really hard to get networks and streaming platforms and everyone to green light anything because they kind of just everyone's so gun shy. So they kind of, don't want to take a risk on something. Everything they want to do is so safe, or like, it's so hard to get, back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s, you were able to make little kind of experimental little films, and you can make little movies. And it's like now it's kind of, people are just so worried to greenlight anything because one bad thing gets them fired. So they need all these quote unquote justifications of greenlighting. And of course, like I said, with the documentary, when we were pitching it a little bit, we kind of ran into that a little bit.
From what I heard from others say as well, there's kind of a certain formula checklist you need to check off. You need to have this diversity, you need to have this, you need to have that, which kind of waters down one's art and kind of puts them in a box and gets rid of some of that creativity. Not that there shouldn't be diversity in the world, but it feels like
Totally, the
creativity
irony.
has really been hindered, though.
Yeah, the irony, like you said, I mean, it's like they want diversity, but they want to keep everything the same. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's like they feel so much pressure to do things safely and no controversy, and basically end up kind of greenlighting just the same stuff. So when you ever present to them something different or maybe a little out of the box or something that maybe doesn't check off all their little boxes, they're incredibly gun shy. Just because of this day and age, it's very hard. I mean, you can't, you couldn't make a movie like The Breakfast Club nowadays where there's five white children or white kids in a room, friends. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
diversity is great, but I mean, it's more that I think things should always just be organic. It's whatever the filmmaker wants to do, and everyone's just, I think, at this point overly analytic, where it's great to be diverse, but when it's forced is when it becomes a problem. Create creatively.
Agreed. Speaking of Breakfast Club, that was actually filmed right down the street from me, like a mile away. It is crazy now that
Yeah, it's a police
oh,
station now,
yes,
isn't
I
it?
was getting ready to
Yeah.
say that. Yes. It's so sad, but yeah.
Yeah, I
But
remember when I was in town, I tried to go in there and they kind of wouldn't let me inside because supposedly it's like I think that the gymnasium still exists somewhere in there, but of course, like unless you work there, you're not going to be able to see it. I know I'm always big into filming locations and kind of looking at stuff like that. So I mean, I'm sure I don't know if you've
yeah, for
been
sure.
down to Winnetka and looked at the street where Home Alone house is, and it's just crazy because it's literally like walking onto a movie set. When you walk onto that
Yes.
street, it's identical to the film. And it's
Hmm.
just you just feel, especially if you go there in like November, December, it's really magical.
Bucket list moment here. Always wanted to do this. I'm probably not the first person to do this. Yeah. Am I not the first?
No. How much do I owe you? Keep the change, you filthy animal.
A lovely cheese pizza.
Just for me.
Spent a lot of time in the North Shore, also season ticket holders to that. That area is very magical and makes sense why John Hughes would want to film so many movies in those areas like Home Alone. Ugh, at least it means a lot to me driving through there, and maybe because of all of the John Hughes movies I have
Mhm.
watched, but it's really beautiful. Always fascinated. I think I kind of referenced this at the beginning. Those that have a love for pop culture, but for their career, they may go a different avenue, and understandably, um, I wanted to go to school for art and marketing, but I also didn't want to be a broke artist. So I went a totally different route. But you are not only a lawyer, but a documentarian. And you also have credits from various shows and assisting roles. And as you mentioned, about 15 years or so of credits. Was it something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things. I mean, it's like you can kind of just. I've worked on a bunch of TV shows and a lot of things on the development side within the corporate. So, yeah, just a lot of. I've definitely had my fingerprint on a lot of random things, but definitely fun and just kind of as the career kind of goes on. I mean, I think you were kind of asking before, like how you can kind of link the two. Like, how do you, as an attorney, like, it's, I mean, there's not a lot of times, of course, as an attorney that I bring the pop culture into my job, but definitely the other way around. If I'm ever working on something entertainment wise, I think it's, I kind of learned that going into this project, having my legal background really came in handy as far as kind of understanding and kind of even talking with the family who went through a big lawsuit after Heather passed away. Because after she passed away, there was a big wrongful death suit that was brought against the hospital and the doctors who misdiagnosed her. And kind of that whole was a whole, 4-year lawsuit that happened. And at least, like, the family was very kind in letting me look at all the legal documents, which with my background, I understood. Because it's like, when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, I understand actually what's going on here. Because, and of course, like, for non-attorneys or non people who kind of were going through that, it was a very hard experience for the family to go through, because the other side was doing what they're supposed to do and try to defend the hospital and kind of having their own take of what went on that time, and kind of put the families and Heather's friends through some really hard depositions and just a lot of tough times. And I at least tried to bring some clarity to them after kind of reading all the depositions that were kind of like reading a time capsule from like 1991, 92, at least explaining to them what the other side was doing when it may appear that they were attacking them. And it's kind of like they weren't really attacking them. They were just trying to paint a certain picture. So even though it feels personal, it's not really personal.
Yeah, it was nice when we had the chance to talk prior to today, those stories that you were able to share, which honestly probably made my month hearing those stories.
Yeah, well, thank you.
And as we said, the impact that you were able to have on Heather's family, which we'll get into more, but also her friends who went through a very, it had to be very traumatic to go through that during that age, and probably didn't feel like a good sense of closure and wondering, did I say and do the right thing? But knowing that not only your love for this topic and what you were creating, but also your expertise and wanting to help these individuals, that you were really able to do that. So, regardless of where the documentary would go, you made a huge difference to those people. So, that is something you should be very proud about.
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah, no, definitely. That was one of the most, because this was a personal journey, even for myself doing through this project. This was, a lot of times hopefully the finished product will be enjoyed by everybody, but of course the process of making it was something very special for all of us. Because like I mentioned, it was a small crew, small group, and really, Heather's friends who we kind of found, and she really had some great friends that really never exploited her over the years. They've never gone on message boards. This is really the first time any of them have spoken about Heather publicly, and some of them even privately. They just kind of, I mean, if you imagine just, when Heather passed away, they were young, they were 12 years old. And that's an incredibly traumatic thing to happen to a child. A couple of friends who we interview in the documentary were at school with her. And it was one of those things where she was at school on Friday and gone by Monday. So it was kind of and it was a real shock, because like no one really knew she was sick. So it wasn't like something like you had someone that you were going to school with who was very sick. Like no one even
Right.
knew how sick she was. So it really was a shock. And then, a few of the friends were brought back in for depositions about a couple years later. So they were now at this time like 14, 15, and kind of brought in blindly, not really knowing like what, kind of course, even being brought into a deposition now at anyone's age, it's like, it's not an easy thing to do. But imagine being a child or being a minor and going in there and being asked questions that were not the easiest to answer, or just if you didn't even have the answer, or then also feeling guilty if you didn't have the answer, like you felt like you weren't really sticking up for your friend Heather, like you kind of really were having a tough time there. So definitely after I read the depositions and spoke with some of the friends, I kind of gave them an insight, and kind of, I think I brought some closure to a couple of the friends, one especially.
That's really amazing to hear. Now, Brian, what brought you to here? What inspired you to get to the point where you are creating the documentary on Heather O'Rourke? She was here which of course dives into her and how beloved she is. What inspired you to do this?
That's a very simple answer here. Heather was my childhood crush. So
Oh,
yeah, so when I mean, just at that particular moment in my
hmm,
life, in my time, I was crushing Heather and I was 9 years old. And she, during the time where I was crushing her is when she passed away. So that was pretty traumatic for me personally. Because I mean, I remember where I was when I heard about it, when I was picked up from school, I heard it on the radio, and it was just one of the first times I personally ever had to deal with death. And the death of a child, it really just didn't really, I didn't understand it. And so kind of as the years kind of went on, I always kind of in the back of my mind said, if I ever found myself in a position to do something in her memory or anything, I would do it. And then somehow this opportunity presented itself when a friend of mine, Nick Bailey, who had me on his podcast, I was talking about the 90s or the pop culture projects I was working on. And somehow we got talking to the fact about Heather and how he had a connection to the family. And basically we teamed up and we reached out to the family and kind of wanted to see if we can do this for Heather. And the family is completely out of Hollywood. They're not a Hollywood family at all. And it's more that we wanted to the point of it was to really get Heather's story out there, just to kind of tell her story of what her life was like. And of course, as a person who was very familiar with her, I wanted to learn a lot more about her personally and and really get that story out there. So that was kind of the driving force. Because I mean, I looked at Heather as more like a childhood friend, because that was the mentality of going into it, that it was like I'm doing this for like an old friend I had, because she meant a lot to me as a kid. And then the funny thing is, we talked about that healing process during this whole making of the film. I didn't realize that I had my own personal healing process, because obviously Heather's death was traumatic for me as a child, and I've never had anyone to talk to about it, because it was like no one could really, I didn't know Heather personally. And it was really talking to her friends who kind of were reliving that day and telling me about it, and they were around my age. It was kind of like, for the first time I had someone that I could talk to, albeit they knew her and had, their trauma was different, but it was still kind of the same trauma of the passing of a specific person. So I kind of found a little bit of healing myself.
that's very beautiful and poetic. I'm trying not to cry. I
Oh, I'm
didn't
sorry, don't.
realize that.
Yeah, so definitely it's one of those things where I think when you kind of came into this project like I did, and Nick feels the same way. It's like, I'm not in this to make money, so to say. I mean, of course we
Mhm.
all are, but I kind of have no mandates from any company. And I think the advantage that we had of going into it just as a two-man team is we were going to do this the right way. And it was one of those things where if it can't be done correctly, it's not going to be done at all. So it's like a lot of times when we were meeting with different production companies or networks as we were pitching this after it was made, almost everyone wanted it to be something different. They just said, "Oh, this is great, but can it be this? Can it be this?" And we're just like, "No, like we can't." The whole point of it is we want to keep it a certain way, because it's so tempting to want to veer off into the more salacious parts of her story, and even ones that veer away from her completely. And that's kind
Right.
of what we were being tempted by. And that was just one of those things where we gave the family our word that we were going to make something a certain way, and we're just going to keep it. We're going to keep it that way without compromising Heather's memory, or at least the family who's put their trust into us.
And that's great you stayed with that integrity even after all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into it, because I'm sure it could have been a lot easier to go a different route, but that says a lot about your character, Brian. Now, speaking of folks wanting to go a different route, whether or not it has to do with Heather or it has to do with Poltergeist and that whole fandom. There has been so much speculation and mystery surrounding Heather's tragic passing. What are your thoughts on the rumors and the conspiracy theories that continue to swirl around her from time to time?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's of course, going into it, we knew that there were some strong rumors going into it. And we even told the family, as documentarians, if we ever do come across anything that's true, or that's like, not so flattering, we have a duty to present it. And they understood. They said, that's fine. So we did, we didn't go into this project with any bit of a bias. We kind of, as documentarians, want to show things how they were. But we really went deep and kind of tried to we knew these rumors in the back of our head and pursued all of them, at least to see if there was any truth to any of it. And we went really deep and found nothing. I mean, we knew there'd be nothing, but at least we really went deep into anything that was being said and anything that's ever been really said about her death. I mean, I think it's really I mean, it's pretty clear what she died of. There's no question of it. And I think just for some reason, people I think are not satisfied with it because I think Heather's death angers a lot of people because it could have been prevented. Like Heather should not have died. It was more of a misdiagnosis, and if they had diagnosed her correctly and the type of blockage that she had could have been corrected with a simple surgery, and Heather should be alive today. And that's, I think, what doesn't sit well with anybody. And so I think they look to blame someone else or try to think that there's maybe something more than what is the truth. And I think that's kind of where it comes from. And then, of course, just as Heather's, I think the reason why you wonder why they pick it on this poor girl, or it's really, I think, just Heather O'Rourke, not as a human, but as a pop culture figure. She was a young girl in horror movies and died at 12 and died while making a movie, and a movie that was kind of like an ironic death, kind of like Paul Walker dying in a car crash, kind of like she died and she was starring in a movie where death is kind of after her. So it's kind of that irony kind of plays a part to it. But I think, and also usually everyone talks about there's always like that young little blonde girl is always kind of the one haunting houses and haunting sets. And so I think it's just kind of like her persona just opens herself to rumors. And then, of course, she worked in a time and in an era and with a lot of famous people like Steven Spielberg and Henry Winkler and some of these big names. So I think she kind of leaves, not because of anything she did, but it just makes her very susceptible to be a target for rumors.
Agreed. It was a perfect storm that made her viable for that to happen. Unfortunately, people just took it way too far because, as we know, some of those speculations or blinds had to do with how did she really pass away, and because of those within the studio system, allegedly, which we all know not to be true. Because as we discussed separately, Brian, if that was the case in the family's lawsuit and fight with the hospital, they would have brought that up, but they didn't
Of
do
course. I mean,
that.
the other side would have jumped on that so fast. I mean, if they would have said, and the thing is that was so great in general about kind of, being that they kept all the stuff from the lawsuit, is we had medical records, we had medical examinations that were done on Heather a year before she passed away. I mean, any of these alleged things that happened would have showed up in all of these reports. And if the hospital was able to see or get even an inkling of some other possibility of any type of thing that led to her death other than the flat out misdiagnosis, they would have jumped on that so quickly because that would have cleared them. So, I mean, it's one of those things where just, logically, there's no truth to it. But of course, that doesn't really matter to people who are sitting behind a computer and just making up stuff, and because it sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad thing is, yeah, there was a ton of abuse that went on in the 80s on movie sets with different people, but just happy for Heather that wasn't her story. She was very lucky that she was not only working with she worked with great people who were very protective, and also her mom was very protective. So I mean, she was a very protected person, and she just got lucky and worked with really great people. So it's kind of like, it's a sad thing they kind of try to make her the face of abuse when she wasn't. It's kind of like it's just disrespectful to actual people who were abused, because it's kind of like that's not Heather's story.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It takes away from the others that are actual victims. Not to reference to what's going on today in pop culture, but even with the Puff Daddy Diddy case, however you want to call him, rumor mills are going around so much. This person's a victim. This person's a victim. There's just so much speculation going around. It might be taken away from actual victims. But going back to Heather, Brian, there was also another rumor about grave robbing along those lines, and that both her father and her stepfather were there together. But another way to debunk that is they may have not necessarily been that friendly during that time period, as understandably things could be very awkward and, that type of situation. But it's just
Oh yeah,
lie after lie to feed a narrative.
yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of them you'll read and you'll just kind of roll your eyes because they just sound so false. But it's like, one of those things where, I mean, yeah, there was that little blind item that went on there about
Hmm.
something after she had passed away at the cemetery and desecrating her grave. I mean, it's disgusting for anyone to make it up. But I mean, it's like just kind of it's comical to me when I have so much knowledge, like personal knowledge about the family and how the situation was like. And just when you're reading some of these blind items, at least like, I'm able to read it and be like, I know this is false. Like this is false because of this. Like there's no way this is true. So it's kind of like, but then the question is, I mean, do you even bother even responding to it? Because it's kind of like, how much light do you want to give it? I mean, it's that's kind of the biggest, probably I would say one of the biggest decisions and discussions that we had while making this documentary was how much light do you give some of these rumors? Because once we've done our due diligence and we've completely debunked it, it's kind of like it might be best not even to talk about it because
Right.
it's like, some of them are, especially like the big ones that have caught on online, are just such BS that anyone who's going to choose to believe it is still going to choose to believe it, no matter what we say, because they're in that kind of conspiracy world where they just don't believe anything we say and just think everything's a cover up and everything's this. So it's kind of like most people, when they're watching this documentary, have not even heard of some of these rumors. So it's like we just want them to learn about Heather. So it's kind of like, why put that garbage in their mind when when it's not true?
Yeah, it's a very good point, and I've been experiencing something similar this week also in regards to the Puff Daddy case and also tying it to Epstein, and they're trying to say that a former housewife is involved who actually sued Auntie Lawyer about it. So that there's court documentation and he had to retract that, and even with all of that proof, and knowing also the person behind the rumors was somebody who was very misleading, still people just don't want to believe it. So I think you guys definitely took the right approach with the movie and not highlighting that.
Yeah, we do mention it, touch upon it near the end, but we don't give it an incredible amount of light because it's kind of like there's no reason to be on the defensive. Like, it's kind of like just because someone makes something up, of course, there's that part of me that wants to stand up on the top of a mountaintop and be like, this isn't true. Like, this is
Hmm.
so false. But at the same time, it's kind of like sometimes it's best to not really respond or to kind of present, like, here's the real story of Heather. And so you will know it's not true because you are seeing the real story and you're knowing that this is just, there's no way this could be true. So it kind of makes it this weird spot. And even like you're saying with, the hard thing about the internet is that even when someone retracts something, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like you put it out there and it goes out there everywhere. And then like a week later, oh, there's a retraction. This is false. No one sees that retraction. It's already
Yeah.
been republished and talked about. And like, people are not going to see the republication or the retraction. So it's kind of, it makes it why it's, again, it becomes kind of tattooed. It's kind of like throughout the years with Heather, of course, the tabloids always would have a lot of stuff to talk about Heather, but that would just like about the poltergeist curse or whatever salacious kind of thing they want to make up or kind of put together that kind of will sell newspapers. But then the thing is, it'll be gone off the shelf in about a week and no one remembers it. And then
Right.
the internet comes on and then all of a sudden it gets tattooed on there. And so it's just there to stay. And yeah, so it's a lot harder for families and people when it comes to rumors and such because they don't go away. It's just there, forever versus like, at a newsstand for a week and then in the garbage.
Yeah, it spreads like wildfire. I was listening to our friend's Cassandra's podcast today, and she had Aaron's Carter's fiance or mother to his child when he passed away on, because there's all of this speculation going around with his passing and if it had to do with Puff Daddy again. Sorry, it keeps on coming back to Puff Daddy. But she was also explaining how hurtful it is to see all these elaborate speculations and rumors that are going on about him, which are clearly false. I just think sometimes people don't think about, oh, it may bring me excitement and dopamine in the moment, wondering if this is true or not. But think about the person that it's written about. Think about their family members that it may affect. I just don't think enough people think about that.
Yeah, well, of course, like, when they sit there, and that's what happens, like when they try to play like armchair detective, like when they're, and they probably comes from a good place. They're probably thinking that they've linked a couple things. So when something big comes out, like a P. Diddy story where there was all this stuff going on, and then you can pull people from like Nick Carter, or sorry, not Aaron Carter, where it's like, he passed away, he's gone, he's can't defend himself. And now you can sit here and try to link him to that, and all of a sudden he gets like, you bring it up and you put it in people's minds, you put it out there. That's the whole thing with Heather. I mean, Heather's been gone for 35, 36 years, and then if something comes out about something completely unrelated, all of a sudden people try to link her to it, like, oh, maybe, because they want to sit there and think, who else maybe was a victim of this? Oh, maybe Heather was, because Heather died in 1988 and she was starring in movies around these people, maybe, and this could possibly have happened. So, and then all of a sudden, according to them in their brain, it did happen. And it's kind of like, people start running with it. And then you have people online who kind of believe it also, like agree to them and say, oh, that does sound like a good, that could have happened. That's maybe what happened, and Hollywood cover it up and conspiracies. And that's kind of what happens. And then all of a sudden Heather's name gets brought up again. And, the thing is, people think they're just talking about it, but then it gets back to the family. And just, imagine like, you lose your daughter, you lose your sister, you lose, your niece. Then all of a sudden, and how she passed, and it was very traumatic for you, and you knew her and you knew her story. And then all of a sudden, some stranger is trying to create a narrative that she was abused on a set, and it's kind of like, no, she wasn't. And like, it's just to bring that up is just to even make that, not even like reaching out to the family, oh, maybe is this true, or they're just more just like, okay, we're just gonna make this up, and she's not here to defend herself, so it's a victimless crime.
Right.
And just not thinking that that she was a human being.
Hopefully, the more people hear these stories, they will take more consideration into it. I was guilty of it for a long time as well, but it's been a good learning moment.
Yeah, no, no, definitely. I think a lot of people, that's like, even what we've seen, like, people, it's funny especially when it comes to Heather, they're very strong. Like, I mean, there's times when I would like try to push a little bit where someone would say like, oh, she was abused by blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah, believe me, I know. And then I push them like real kindly. I'm like, so how did you hear this? Oh, well, I read this article online and it was by a reputable person and I know it's true. Well, what was the article? Well, maybe it wasn't an article. It was like, maybe it was a comment that I saw, but I don't remember, but I think it was about this. And then I'm like, oh, so you don't really know it's true? No, I guess I maybe don't, but I mean, it just, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, you were just so strong a minute ago saying that for sure she was abused by so-and-so. And now as I'm talking to you, you're kind of like, well, maybe she wasn't. That's kind of like, that's just kind of what you run into. It's like, we're just waiting, just in general. I mean, I don't really want to give too much light to these things, but it's more just like, at least if there's any even circumstantial evidence to anything, just like present it. Like if there's anything, I'm all ears. I'm listening. And that's what we were doing this whole time. It's like, hey, if you think she was abused or something, what somewhat evidence do you have? And the more you poke, there's literally nothing. Like nothing. Like no one. Yeah, well, no one she worked with has ever been accused of anything that we know of that, like, is real. So there's not even, like I said, circumstantial. It's not like, you had someone who was arrested for something. It wasn't like she worked with P. Diddy. So I mean, it's like, so it's kind of like she wasn't even around it. So like, where are you kind of pulling this from?
Right. People just need to put a little bit more thought and research behind it, and also think about what some of the consequences should be. But Brian, along the lines of wild speculations, the last thing I want to talk about wild speculations is all of the craziness that has seemed to be swirling around Spielberg over the last decade. For whatever reason, it seemed to come out of nowhere. And I'm going to investigate that more of when did those rumors really start? And if it did come from other people, one person, other people just started picking that up. But with working closely with Heather's family, do you mind just taking a moment to explain what their experience was with him? Because I feel bad with these blinds that have been put out there. It made me think such a bad way. And I feel like I was brainwashed. So just any insight from somebody who would actually know would be very helpful if you're open to that.
Yeah, no problem. I don't understand exactly why Spielberg has become such a target online. I still try to figure out, because I mean, this is a guy who's got such a great reputation within the business. And as you know, nowadays, nobody's safe. So, I mean, it's like, if you're Bill Cosby or anyone, if you're the king of Hollywood, if any dirt comes out about you, you're going to be exposed. I mean, that's kind of just how the world is now. So, I mean, with Spielberg, there's never been anything. And he's just, especially when it comes to kids, I mean, he's got such a big history and a relationship with children throughout his career. Movies like, Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. and Jurassic Park. I mean, we worked with so many child actors, and there's never been anything other than just like amazing stories being told. So it's kind of a weird thing why, I mean, I don't know if maybe it's the Jewish thing. I'm not sure what makes him such a target for people to try to say that he's a bad guy. Because I mean, within the industry and even within the community, because I mean, I live in Los Angeles and he lives here as well. And you kind of hear stories, and I've, had a lot of people who've worked kind of with him, and I've heard nothing but great stories about him. He's very respectful. He's very talented. And it's like, he's someone who kind of really doesn't have any dirt when it comes to that type of stuff about how he treats people, adults, children, anybody. He's just a very respectful human being. And as far as Heather goes, I mean, he was very good to Heather. I mean, the stories that I would hear from her mom, I mean, of course, as you know, Stephen discovered her, and it was a very sweet story that, of course, the internet has now taken this sweet story and make it very dirty. Like, I mean, here just she was eating lunch at the MGM commissary, and he came over, he was looking for his Carol Ann, and he kind of looked over and saw her, and he was like, that's the girl I'm looking for, that's perfect, and came over and talked to her and talked to her mom. And it was one of those really sweet stories. And of course, now with your 2024 eyes, you can look at it and be like, oh, what a creep, he came over to this little kid. It's like, it's just kind of one of those things where, I mean, he was so respectful and kind to Heather, and treated her with such care and respect, and made sure she was always safe. And also just like, throughout her life, he would send her like little notes. And it's really just, they had a very sweet, respectful relationship. So it's kind of a thing. I think even about a month or two before Heather passed, I think it was Stephen's 40th birthday, he was having a friend of his was making kind of like a little tribute video for him. And they reached out to Heather to kind of like say a little something, kind of like she was part of the video, like kind of everyone that he's worked with kind of said a little tiny thing for Stephen. And she was asked to do it, and she did it. And then like he said,
this is what we want to do. Here's the angle. You go out, you find all these people, you sit them down, you say, sum up Stephen Allen Spielberg in one word. Sum them up in one word.
Cuddly.
Unpredictable.
Whimsical.
Dirty.
Magical.
Jewish.
Passionate.
Nuts.
Connected. Engaging.
Imagination.
Youth.
Oh. Nudge.
Textured.
Innovative.
34.
Dad. Loyalty.
Human.
Great.
Incredible.
Generous. Sweet. Kasha.
Magic.
Sexy.
Macabre.
Resourceful. Joyous.
Invisible.
Rosebud.
Boss.
Schmool. It's a little bit bigger than schmoll.
Astute.
Especially his hiring practices.
Mashuggy. Little Mashuggy.
There you go.
I heard Marilyn Monroe did this for President Kennedy, so why shouldn't I do it for you? Happy birthday to you. Maybe everybody could sing along so it wouldn't sound so bad. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Stevie. Happy birthday to you.
And then like he sent her a thank you note that we have a copy of. And the thank you note was like, it was so great seeing you in my video. Look forward to seeing you. And it was literally received 4 days before she died. So it was just a real, she did see it, which was nice. But it's like, one of those things where, again, with Steven and Heather, like for anyone to even make any remote implication, when they had such a sweet relationship. And of course, like her mom's memory of Steven was so wonderful, and as it should be, because he was wonderful to her. And so for anyone to kind of crap on that for no reason, like zero, it's not like they found out something. It's like they just made it up, like, because he was a big producer, big director, and he must have done something to her. That's kind of the thing. And of course, he was just as close with Drew Barrymore. Has Drew ever said one thing about him other than that
No.
he was like a father figure to him? I mean, it was just, again, it's like, we don't even talk about anything in there. Cause I mean, Steven is a great guy. I've really heard nothing. It's like Steven Spielberg and like Tom Hanks. I mean, like these guys are just universally known as really kind human beings. So I think maybe when people have a squeaky clean image, that makes people want to, crap on it.
Yeah, and tear it down.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's the long answer to your question, I guess, like, why people are bringing up Spielberg in a negative way now online. I don't know. I just think maybe it's religious. I don't know. Because I think he's, maybe that's it. Because it's definitely not anything he's done. And it's probably not brought up by anyone intelligent, just to be honest.
Yeah, that's for sure. But no, I really appreciate you, Brian, sharing some of that insight and aspects that you've heard from Heather's family herself on the type of person that he is. I really appreciate that. And speaking of Heather O'Rourke's family, you understandably worked very closely with them on this project. Was there anything shared with you that they feel that the world should know about her? And of course, we're gonna hopefully find out more next year with the documentary. But is there anything you want to share in the meantime?
Well, of course, everything, is in there that they wanted to share. So, I mean, it's like, as far as I think just personal stories of her and just really like who she was. And that's kind of, at least as the filmmaker, filmmakers, Nick and I really try to let the viewer know who she was. And that's kind of, at least what was fun for me as I was digging into it, because like, you never know, I told you I was a big Heather fan, and you never know what she was going to be like. I never, so for all I could have dug deep in this and found out she was a snot. I mean, I have no idea. Like, it's like, because of course, so I spoke with all of, random friends, people who went to school with her in Lakeside and Big Bear and Anaheim and coworkers and all of that. And it's like, and the family members, and I really feel I got a great sense of who she was as a person. And, and she was a very lovely person, which was really happy to find out. And at least like the one thing that I found interesting when it came to, I spent hours talking to people like the friends and the teachers and all these crazy people I had to really go do deep dives to find. And what I found really interesting was every time I would talk to them, I kid you not, they would all say the same thing at the very beginning. And we're talking about people who didn't even know each other, people in, like I said, Big Bear, Lakeside. They all said the very same thing first, and that Heather was very normal. And I just found it interesting that was what they felt the need to say first. And I kid you not, when I say everyone said that was like the first thing out of their mouth. And I just think that was a fascinating thing, because of the fact that I guess what they mean by that is that she, like, you kind of never really would know that she was an actress. Like, she kind of had no attitude. And if anything, didn't talk about it. It wasn't like she walked in and like, hey, I'm the Poltergeist girl, or I'm the girl who's like on all these commercials or guest starring on these TV shows, or I worked with Spielberg. I mean, if anything, she never wanted attention for that. So I think like that's kind of, as a child, what kind of jumped out to them. Like, because I don't know about you, but I at least went to school with a bunch of child actors, and you knew that they were actors. Like, they made it very known that they were acting, and that they had to, I'm missing school because I got an audition, or they really brought a lot of attention to them. So I think when the friends said that she was very normal, I understood what they meant.
Imagine how it is to be around child actors, but that is great to hear from her friends, and also funny that they all said that, but that just says a lot about her.
Yeah, and it was fun personally. The best part for me was finding out kind of how she was as a person, and as a kind of what it was like being friends with her in school, and hearing kind of stories of, them passing notes, which they still had, and they were sharing with us, and kind of little stupid, silly things that they did, and things that she would do, like, when little girl drama would happen in school, and how she would be kind of the mediator, and just really fun little sweet moments that her and her friend would share. Like, we just have a lot of those great stories that some of them we couldn't even put into the documentary, but Nick and I are having discussions of how we may be able to share these clips with the mega Heather fans, because obviously, you're making a movie that's like 90 minutes long, but we've got 4 or 5 or 6 hours worth of footage. But it's
Yeah.
like, so it's hard. It is hard as a producer, you trying to put together a marketable project, but also, like, keep your integrity of what you think, not just that you'd find interesting, but what the audience will. Because I mean, like, of course, I can watch 4 hours worth of Heather stuff, but like, my parents would get bored after about 10 minutes. So it's like,
Give me
there's a
10
lot of,
hours.
yes, there's a lot of great stories that didn't make it into the documentary that we filmed, that we're going to find some special way, because there is this like Heather community online that she's got a very devout fan base who kind of are waiting with pins and needles for this thing to come out. And it's been challenging, because I know they're very they heard about it when we first started doing it, and it's a lot of, I get emails probably every week, like, is it coming out? Is it coming out? Is this even really happening? And it's like, there's a lot of them don't understand that it takes a while. I mean, we could have released it 3 years ago on YouTube, and that's not what this project deserves. It's like I said, we're either going to do it right or not at all. So that's at least they'll find a way to find these cool stories, because there are a ton. I mean, some of the ones that, like, your average person wouldn't find interesting, but I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think I saw some on Facebook too. I don't know if it was through your group. I need to double check now, because maybe I stumbled across it before I knew about the documentary, or if it was another fan page of hers. But with waiting on pins and needles, hopefully we won't have to wait too much next year.
Yeah, hopefully not. I mean, when there's an exact, release, I mean, our eyes are going to be early next year, and we will let everyone know where it's going to be, and if it's going to be a screening, or if it's going to be online or streaming. So, I mean, definitely it's going to be seen. This is not being made to not be seen. So it's just more like we're trying to do the best we can possibly do. And, the frustrations that you kind of deal with is, like, a lot of, like I was mentioning, like, we would bring it to a lot of places who they'd watch it, and they came back and they said they really liked it, but they don't know if they can sell it to their boss, because it doesn't have enough, like, it needs more Poltergeist, or some more behind the scenes of Poltergeist, or maybe if it talked about the Poltergeist curse, like, for 20 or 30 minutes, and we're just sitting here like, really, like, the same crap that's been just regurgitated over and over again. It's like, we have some, it's like, but they're just nervous, like, they're nervous to take a chance on something, because it's not those things about, like, Poltergeist, or the curse, that they know that's going to do well, like, that's going to be attractive to their bosses. So it's kind of like that'll justify their reasoning for green lighting something. So that's kind of the challenge. That's a whole business thing that I know, because I worked on that side, so I get it. It's like everyone nowadays is so worried to lose their job that they just try to hedge their bets like crazy. Like, so if they took a chance on a project, it's like, if it doesn't do as well as they hope, they're like, oh, well, I greenlit it because it was about Poltergeist and Spielberg, and it had this, so you can't get mad at me for this. There's nothing wrong that I did.
Yeah.
So it gets challenging, because we're not going to compromise the film, and basically, like, do something poor to the family, and poor to Heather's memory. It's like, whether it's seen by one person or millions of people, at least it should be done correct.
Agreed. And I look forward to sharing with everyone next year when it comes out. I'll definitely make sure to shout it from the rooftops. Can't wait to watch it. But
yeah, I got a question for you. Is there any
yeah.
question when it comes to Heather? Is there any personal question that you have, like, about her, and anything? I mean, of course, like, I get a lot of random fans who ask me things, and sometimes their questions are a little inappropriate, but I'm not asking you to ask an inappropriate one, but it's, I think they just get excited to ask a question for someone who knows the answer.
Either what was her favorite pastime, or anything you can say about her relationship with her sister. Her relationship with her sister is what, like, sits with me the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, I mean, her relationship with her mom was like one of those like mother-daughter inseparable things where it's like they were very close. So I mean, it's like, and also she was close with her sister as well. I mean, sister was about maybe 4 years older than her. So at the time of her passing, they were at very different places in their lives. You had Heather, who was 12, and her sister was like 16 or 17. And so you kind of had, that's a very big age difference.
Yeah.
So, but they were very close. And I think that definitely they would have been a lot closer when they got older. So it was a real, a real big loss there. So, I mean, but they were very close, and it was a very close family. So they did have a good relationship, and just, they were very different, and they, just kind of like, grew up and just were like Tammy was a dancer first, and kind of like Tammy was doing stuff in the entertainment industry just by happenstance because she was such a great dancer. And that's kind of what led them to go to Hollywood, because she was cast in a movie called Pennies from Heaven, where she was one of the dancers. And it was during lunch that day when Spielberg happened to be in there and saw Heather there. And Heather was just there because her mom had no one to watch her. So it's kind of like she had to take her with her. So it was just one of those kind of serendipitous moments.
Wild.
Yeah, like this is, like I said, this is not a Hollywood family. This was not, her mom didn't have stars in her eyes. This was just like she wanted to support her daughter and what she had a passion. She was a great dancer, Tammy, her sister, and so she wanted to give her every opportunity she had. And she like got that role, I think, on the Tim Conway show as a dancer, which is one of those like one out of tens of thousands of people. So she was that spectacular of a dancer, and they just kind of wanted to support her, and kind of like their attitude, even with Heather too. Like Heather was fine if she never acted again after a role. Like she kind of would do Poltergeist 1 or 2, and then you'd even see her in interviews, and they're like, well, what happens if it doesn't do well? Just kind of like, she's like, hey, then I'll go back to school. Like she kind of like wasn't trying to like her, and same with her family. Her family was like, hey, if you tell us to go to this audition, we'll go to it, and just let us know. And if she never gets another audition ever, then we'll just continue to live our lives. And because she had a very healthy upbringing, and her parents, I mean, even her family now, I mean, if you meet them, they're just very down to earth, very cool, and just very sweet. And it's, I mean, of course, you don't wish this on anybody, but if there's anyone you wouldn't want to wish this tragedy on, it was Heather's mom. It was like the sweetest lady, one of the sweetest ladies I've ever met. So it really is. And it gets surreal, of course, as I tell you, with the fact that like, I know Heather's mom. Like, you sit there in your moments when you're sitting there, like thinking of me when I was 9 years old, and like, I'm getting to do this for Heather, and kind of going into her book bag from 1988 and kind of looking at all of her personal things. And because that's kind of like what happened there, because pretty much like when she passed away, they had that lawsuit and they put everything of hers into a storage bin, and then kind of we went into the bin, and kind of, so it was like a time capsule, and really looking through Heather's things, and really kind of brought it to life to me, and just made me feel really special. There's moments where Nick and I were just like, we got our producer hats on and we're trying to do our job, and then it's kind of like there's moments we had to kind of take a moment to like, see what we're doing. Like, this is really special.
Yeah, very meta. From all of my research on her family, they seem so humble, so down to earth, but I'm going to support my daughters, their passion. And they really seem like that family unit that you really hope that anyone in Hollywood has, to kind of keep your head on straight, which I think too many Hollywood actors and actresses don't have, which gets them into certain situations. So they seem to be really good parents. And they did everything right.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's why it's like you gotta have like, Heather O'Rourke and Drew Barrymore who had these kind of parallel lives, because they were both like launched from the same platform at the same time, like the same vessel, because they were both like Spielberg girls. Like they both, the summer of '82, they both movies came out, and it's kind of like you had Drew, who was on the Hollywood scene and going to the parties, and because her mom was involved in that, and really she was kind of doing that. And here Heather would go to an event and then go back home. So it's like you had kind of two different upbringings. Yes, I mean, which is why Heather was not involved in anything salacious, or she was everything about her was just like, she was very smart, very well behaved, and she did what she was supposed to do, and then just kind of went home. And her mom was not looking to exploit her and be like, oh, you should go to this event. You should go. It was more like her mom was just with the agent, be like, whatever you think Heather should be at, let me know. We'll do it. And then, so we'll, and if there's nothing she has to do, then we'll just go back to doing our thing and we'll go do our stuff.
Well, she was really lucky to have the family that she had. I know she's definitely looking over them now. And I'm sure she's definitely, Brian, now that you have a guardian angel looking over you too. You do know that, right? There's like no way
That's very
around
sweet.
that.
Yeah, well, I hope she's happy with the job that we're doing, because it's definitely been quite the adventure, more so than I even thought it was going to be, as far as the challenges. And just like, anytime you're doing, a documentary, which is the first one I've done. I mean, it's different when you're doing a movie, you kind of have a script, shooting day, it's beginning, middle, end. With documentaries, they're like living, breathing creatures. It's like you kind of go into it with like maybe a skeleton of interviews, and you just never know what you're going to get. And what you kind of hear in an interview is going to spur a certain aspect of it. So it definitely has taken on different incarnations, and it's just been challenging. So I mean, it's and challenges I've had just with everyone. I think every one of us had our moments where we were all kind of done with the project. That happens with every project that you work on. I always like it. You kind of just like every moment kind of like, that's it, I'm done. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And then the next day you get back on board, and it's just like, so I think we all kind of had those moments, including the family. But I think at the end of the day, we're coming back around, and I just hope that, it's well perceived. And, of course, all I care about in my heart is that, Heather would be proud of this, and the family's happy. And that's kind of really what sticks with me, that at least the family can sit back and be like, this is something that really honors my daughter. And like I said, when we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, that we can't stop. Heather's going to outlive all of us. And it's just, we know there's going to be more rumors about her and more things that are going to just come out throughout the years. And at least we will have this one documentary that will be out there, where if anyone really wants the truth and wants to really care about knowing who Heather was as a person and knowing her real story, they can watch this. And then if they want to sit there and make up fantasies about anything else, then by all means, go for it. And the family has a great attitude about it too, because they just like, I mean, of course, you don't like anyone saying anything about their daughter, but they understand that it's not personal. I mean, even though it is personal, it kind of is not being, these people who are making up these rumors are not doing this because they didn't like Heather or there's anything personal with her. It's her persona. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they understand, like, they don't really have any hate in their heart about it. They, of course, are hurt, like any of us would be, but at the same time, they know that, it's not being done maliciously, and it's more just being done somewhat ignorantly. And maybe even people they think they're doing the right thing, or they think that they're advocating for her. Like they have good intentions in a way, because they think that they're kind of like sticking up for someone who doesn't have a voice. But at the same time, it needs to be a little more responsible.
Agreed.
Yeah, so in relation to when you were asking mainly what my legal background, how that benefits me as a producer, in this situation, I mean, it really helped because I was able to understand a lot of the depositions I read, the medical records, medical evaluations that I kind of saw about her, and that really helped understand everything fully. But I just kind of want to say one quick thing about Heather's death that I think will be interesting, that I learned and maybe your viewers would really appreciate, and I maybe give them a little clarity, because we were talking about before how kind of like her death really doesn't sit well with people, because they kind of feel that it could have been prevented. But anyways, I mean, of course, my legal background helped, but I was able to read all the depositions and the like hundreds of pages of depositions and medical records, and even the medical evaluation for Poltergeist 3 that kind of gave her clearance. And pretty much all of them painted a picture that basically the diagnosis that she got was the wrong diagnosis, but it wasn't a bad diagnosis. So I think that's kind of something for everyone to realize, that Heather's condition was extremely rare. It's like, as most people who have kind of a congenital birth defect, it usually is detected when they're about 3 or 4 years old. Like, kind of, they have trouble, I guess, a lot of pain going to the bathroom or whatever it is. So usually people with that condition around 3 or 4 years old is when it starts showing, starts kind of peeking its head, and you take them to the doctor and you kind of know. But with Heather, she didn't experience any pain until she was about 11 years old. So that's extremely rare. So it was more that it wasn't on the doctor's radar. And I even did see the x-rays where you do see the blockage, but it kind of mimicked Crohn's disease. So like I was saying, I mean, the thing is, yes, it was wrong, but probably, 9 out of 10 doctors would have gave that same Crohn's disease diagnostic, or that Crohn's disease diagnosis. So I think that's kind of something that people usually think like, oh, well, if she just was seeing better doctors, or her parents should have taken her to better doctors, or Hollywood should have had her with better doctors. But everything, listen, she was seeing some really top doctors. And even in Chicago, when they were filming, they had her see a specialist at the University of Chicago who said the same thing. So I think that's just something that viewers need to, or people need to understand when it comes to her death, that yes, it was a wrong diagnosis, but it wasn't bad. Like, it wasn't a bad one. So that's kind of, I think, what I learned by reading all these with the lawsuits and the depositions and even all the legal jargon, that I think, felt a little better, kind of sat better with me, that, kind of, I think with Heather's death, it was something that was like a perfect storm, and something that kind of could have been prevented. But I think in this instance, it was maybe just in the cards that she was only meant to be here for 12 years or so. So I think that's kind of what makes, kind of what hopefully will sit better than just kind of people thinking, oh God, like, this was terrible, could have been prevented.
Yeah, no, very good points. And I appreciate you reaching back out to provide some clarity, even though I knew that because of our previous conversations as well. But still, you just saying it paints that picture better. And especially thinking back, think about how far we've come medically. Things were just of a certain way, and definitely her parents saw the best of the best, but unfortunately it wasn't detected. So I really appreciate you clarifying that, Brian.
Yeah, no problem. And I think just what people, in the documentary, we even mentioned this in here, that, if there's any good that can come out of Heather's passing, with her being a public figure, is maybe it'll allow parents to, if ever this condition comes up with any of their kids, to maybe have them be checked for this, or maybe just kind of like give parents some thought that maybe if they get a Crohn's disease diagnosis, maybe just have them double check to see maybe if they have a blocked intestine. And so hopefully maybe a life can be saved.
Great points. One of the best points of the episode. So thank you, Brian.
Kind of pop that in there. I just thought that was interesting, because it's like that people are always so angry about Heather's death. And then usually when they're trying to be nice, and they're trying to be helpful, as they're thinking of trying to see, when they hear words, like when they're reading about it, it's not very satisfying, because they will read words like intestinal stenosis or congenital birth defect, and that just sounds like gobbledygook. So I think when people are reading that, they just kind of want to try to make something more like, it couldn't have been this, maybe it was something else. They're just using these words as an excuse, and then the rumors start. Yeah, that's kind of what happens, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any like publication out there, at least from what I saw in my research, that's like in the middle. It's either the conspiracy theories, or it is the hospital court case, which would lead you to believe like she wasn't in the best of hands. But understandably, both sides had to do what they had to do in that situation. So you're the good glue that ties in that in the middle perspective.
Yeah, at least hopefully. Yeah, no, it does. I mean, and hopefully with the documentary, which actually presents the truth and everything, I think as far as what Nick and I, when we were doing our research and actually digging into these medical records and the actual evaluations that went on for, a couple of years, it's pretty clear. There's no mystery around Heather's death. It's very clear what happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's like, a thing where obviously all those are not public record. And so we're just going to at least hope that we have that background while we're presenting this documentary, and at least presenting a point of view that is 100% accurate. And just, that's our job as filmmakers to do. So we're not presenting any rumors or anything, because we know that they've already been debunked. So yeah, so that's kind of at least where we stand.
I cannot say thank you enough for you, Brian. And I also cannot say enough how anxious I am for this movie to come out. But thank you so
me
much.
as well. Yeah, of course. I'll be happy when this thing is all, done, and, and it's out there, and it's the kind of, it'll make me and everyone else happy. Because like I said, there's people waiting on pins and needles, and I get to be the target of, like, everyone, like, what's going on? Like, what, Like, what am I, why am I releasing this? Like it's up to me. Like it's completely like, you know, me doing this. Or like even same with Nick. I mean, we both get attacked quite a bit. Like we're like purposely holding on to this film and not
Have to
releasing
do it
it.
right.
Yeah, it's like you just
Have
do
to
it
do
right
it
or not at all. It's like telling you that it's coming soon. So that's the hope. And that's, at least right now, it's as finished as it's ever been. We've gone through the lawyers, we've cleared the clips, we've kind of gotten there, and it's really about finding the right destination for it and seeing what happens.
Very exciting. Well, Brian, that is a wrap on our fascinating conversation. I could really go on and on and on about this topic with you and everything 80s and 90s. How I would love to pick your brain on you being a fly in the wall with Millionaire Matchmaker. Maybe a different time, Brian, but
Oh, totally. Patty's a complete nut. Okay, and I don't care. I'll say that. Here's the deal. I'll say this publicly. She's a nut, but she's also brilliant. I mean, I love Patty. And the funny thing about her, I'll say this one thing before I go, is like the thing is, what she would do is like we'd have calls with her, and she kind of would like creative calls, and she's very creative. She's a very smart woman. I mean, I actually I like Patty a lot, and she's always entertaining. But it's like the thing is, she would kind of come up with like 10 ideas that she'd be completely hot and like yelling and just, but the thing is, 8 out of the 10 ideas she was right. She had every right to be complaining and yelling about this, and then there'd be those 2 ideas that are just completely bonkers. Like it's kind of like, and it just completely ruins her credibility like in the room. I mean, just like it was just being a fly on the wall, like carrying her creatively was always entertaining. But I did like her, but she's crazy, but in a good way.
thank you for sharing that. That's totally the vibe that I pick up on. But thank you for sharing all of your insights on the 80s and 90s, Brian, along with Heather O'Rourke. And for everyone listening, don't forget to check out Brian's upcoming documentary, Heather O'Rourke. She Was Here. Make sure to follow the page on Facebook. It will be dropping next week. Here, I wish next week.
Don't start
That's
that.
how excited I am. But trust me, you won't want to miss it. So, as always, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Pop Culture Exposé. Next week, we're jumping into the new millennium where reality TV takes over. Internet changes the celebrity landscape and the scandals only get wilder. You won't want to miss it. And if you love today's episode, make sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Until next time, I'm Danielle, and thanks for joining me on this pop culture journey.
Tune into the buzz, it's the talk of the day. From Bravo shows to the latest celeb spree, we've got the tea, come sip it with me. Dani, Goss, and the girl, Pop Culture Exposé, we're spilling all the